So, good morning. My name is René Scherma from Peak Technologies, and I have got the great pleasure here to welcome Christoph from Sensolus, as you can see, in lovely London. So, welcome, Christoph.
Thank you.
Great to have you over. So, we've been clearly partnering with Sensolus since 2024. It's been a really great partnership from the very early days, to be fair. It was fantastic.
Same and we started,
us. Yeah, and we started with a very interesting use case, didn't we?
Yes, indeed. A bit surprisingly, actually, because we started with the trade project, which was actually the charity donation banks, and somehow in 2 months they were losing 20 of them, and we actually helped to get them visible again and to make sure they don't lose them again.
Yeah, they didn't just lose them accidentally, didn't they? So we actually discovered that
yes, of
there
course.
was some organized crime taking place who were basically stealing them from the streets.
And that's correct. And they
bit
do
shocking,
cost,
to be honest, but
yeah, and they do cost £1,000 each one, which was quite a lot.
Yep.
And what we did is we connected them with the IoT technology that we provide to make them visible. So at least to have good inventory and know if those things get lost, taken out of the market or whatever.
Yeah, indeed. And clearly what we found in the last few years that particularly in supply chain, but also beyond that, tracking items have become a really hot topic. And as a result, I guess we've done more and more projects together because people just need to know where their assets are and if they are going to be back in the same place at the same time. So what was your technology? Why is it so unique, and how do you typify our relationship with Peak Technologies?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So we are a very product-focused company. So in the end, we create visibility, and that's in the end today. It's software digitization. You just want to know where are all my things, how do they move, are they still there, are they ready for pickup and stuff like that. What we did, we actually use a sensor for it. So it's an IoT sensor, a tracker. It's a GPS, it's Wi-Fi, works indoor, outdoor, actually everywhere. And a bit similar like the trade donation banks, if you look at supply chain, it's the same thing you want to create. Where is my stuff? Because based on this, you can optimize actually the whole thing. Now this is a technology part, but the real value is in the process. And there, of course, we partner up with you guys because you know the customer, you know the domain, and you actually put our technology in the right place to create the maximum value for them.
Yeah, and I think at Peak Technologies, clearly we are being seen as almost like the technology scout for our customers. So we've got very long-standing relationships, and the business problem of identifying where their returnable assets were became more and more of a topic. And I think what was interesting, I would say 4 or 5 years ago when we started to look into it, there was a lot of different startups with different takes on the technology. It could be Bluetooth, could be RFID, active RFID, etc. And we found that quite a few of those startups were not as reliable, I would say. The concept normally was working very well in a very specific use case with a specific customer that they launched with. And after that, it is more than technology, because what we are looking for in our partnerships is clearly an ability to service the customer afterwards. So longevity of the relationship is really important. The continued investment in the proposition, and I think that's how we found each other actually, because when my team started to engage with your team, we realized that actually there was a really good technology proposition, but also a very clear vision of where you could take this technology going forward. So it's been very good so far, so thank you.
So, well, thanks for that. I can only be very proud, of course, hearing this about the technology we developed. It took us 12 years to get it really right. And of course, the same for us. We are very focused on products, but in the end, getting into the process with the customer is where really the magic happens. Because if you cannot put it with a team that understands very well the technology, if you don't put it in the right way, in the field, in the process, it doesn't work. Even technically it works. Mm-hmm. So, and there is also, I can only say that we are very happy in how our teams cooperated, because it's like they are found a trusted product, and we find experts in the domain who are very critical on what we do, and they are actually there to make value. And this is really the symbiosis, the win-win, where we always been looking for, and that's I'm very happy to partner up with your team.
So one question I had actually, because when we engage with our customers on the returnable items, RTIs, I guess the industry name that everybody uses, when you look into the stats, the market is about $120 billion globally in terms of new RTIs being bought every year. And people have been trying to size the problem in terms of how much actually get lost. So depending on what report you pick up, it's somewhere between 15 and 30%. And actually that is the really interesting part. When we engage with our customers, it's very often that they actually don't know how many items they really lose every year, because it's almost being treated as a consumable. Do you find that the same, and how does your technology start to make that more visible for the clients?
Yes, so today we have 1 million of those assets connected. We've been doing it for 12 years, so we've grown the business. We are mostly industrial manufacturing, transport and logistics, supply chain, intralogistics. So the numbers are right. We have customers, best practice, they're about 3 to 5% of the assets they lose, but it can really become a big number. Why is this? Because if you run your business grows, it goes faster, you need more of those RTPs or returnable packaging, and then at a certain moment, it's normal that you don't have that full control. But it's actually even more shocking is that a lot of those assets never get used the way they should be used. So what we also see in all those customers, that about 8 up to 20% is never used at the capacity it should be used. So there's an underused capacity out there. And what also happens a lot as companies grow, processes grow, often the annual spend on buying new assets is sometimes up to 20% of the total logistics budget just to replace totes and boxes and packaging while they're somewhere in the process still. And they could actually be optimized. So if you all add it up, the numbers makes a lot of sense to start them tracking. And it's a big number, the market, but also understand you have like very high value assets, which are not value because of the assets itself, also of the impact in the process. At that moment, the ROI of tracking them is very obvious. You also have projects like with a lot of roll cages, and we have done with totes and rolling cage for DHL. We are close to 1 million assets only with them. They just play the volume game. So the ROI depends on what you do in your process, what type of company you are, but it is clear if it's invisible, you're losing money.
Yeah, it's interesting because, again, going back to the stats, the reports are quoting that replacing the lost items is about 45% of the problem. The remaining 55% is in admin, assets that I have but I don't use. But actually the second biggest one apparently is the consequential cost of the contents of the asset not arriving in the right place at the right time. And then having to do either a rush order, or maybe I have to stop my production line temporarily because I don't actually have my line side replenishment process in order. And it's that consequential cost that our team tend to focus on with our customers.
Yeah.
Because making that transparent, it becomes very quickly a very easy to understand business case.
Correct.
And what we find is the customers, the fact that they lose the assets, they kind of have taken as a, oh well, that's part of running our business. But if you start to focus on the consequential cost, then suddenly it's like, oh, hold on a second, here's actually an interesting business case. And then we make visible how much they actually don't know. So other than your tracker technology, what our team are particularly happy about is the platform that you provide, because ultimately that's where the value is being generated, right?
I fully agree. And I think for us, it's about exception management. It's about alerts, because if you look at so many assets out there, it's just not about dots on a map. It's really about what is not going the way we expect it to go. And if there is a critical part, will it be there in time? Because once you see those flows, which we see through our application, for example, you actually can know if a part is not leaving on a Thursday from that location, it will never be in time on a Monday for a production slot. And that's where you have to focus on, because as you mentioned, getting production delayed with some hours, it's a nightmare in your costs. And we've seen cases, and you can certainly recognize them, where even short-term helicopter flights need to get into place to get that single chip at the right place to make sure that the production line continues. Stopping production lines is very expensive. Mm-hmm. So it's that whole process, of course, is where all the value is made. Now, on the platform, we know the value is made in seeing the complete visibility and looking at the alerts, the deviations, the flows, inventories, reverse logistics planning, and all those things. But it's very important to be integrated as well. Not only on the top with all types of ERP systems, even today AI systems, but also on the bottom. For example, we do integrate QR code scanning, we have RFID integrations and so on. So it's not a single technology that makes the whole thing work in the end. That's also something that's important. It's that integration part, and I think your team plays a very good role, staying in an independent vision, looking, hey, what is really solving this problem? Where is the best ROI? And actually almost Lego, puzzling in the right way, putting the right bricks at the right locations to make the value for the customer.
It's a very good point, because our customers they don't want siloed systems, basically. They don't want one technology stack for one business problem and then an adjacent technology stack, which is based on a slightly different technology for another business problem. At the end of the day, they see their asset pool as a bunch of assets. And one could be really expensive, another one could be really cheap. And it's that mix and match approach of the technologies that is an absolute wish from our customers, and they don't almost want to think about how that data actually ends up in their systems, right? Because they have all their planning systems, etc., that they use for capacity planning, and they just want a feed.
That's correct.
The rest is really what we focus on as Peak, is to actually make that almost invisible. I always say to our team that if our technology and our solution is invisible to the customer, that is when we've really achieved our objective, because it just needs to work. They just don't even need to think that it is there, to be honest.
I fully agree. And I really think that's also the job we have, both team working together, as you mentioned, making it invisible to them. On the silo part, I think it's a very important thing you mentioned there, and your customer are fully right. That's also why we use almost all standardized technologies. We work on low power communication, but it's public communication. It's what the network operators, like in your cell phone or your smartphone, are actually offering. We use GPS standard, Wi-Fi standard, Bluetooth standard. So we work on standards. We're not putting any proprietary technology inside. On the platform, full open API, everybody can integrate. So it's also a way where we say, please use the data in your business intelligence reporting. Maybe your people from the support want it in Zendesk or another ticketing system. Maybe you want it in an LLM, which is actually like now with all the agents popping up everywhere on AI, maybe you want that also to be integrated. We are open to that because we believe that integration is the strongest part in the digitization of supply chain. And we've seen it in our business. Supply chain has changed enormously. It's also very integrated if you look at it, with all different contractors in between.
Yeah, something that I guess the big consulting firms were already talking about 5 years ago. And now we're catching up in actually delivering the real business benefits into the real world, right?
Yeah, 100%. And what we always look at Sensolus, because we started, and to be honest, 12 years ago, we thought it was more easy just to, you build something, it's everywhere you are, at any time, you get a ping where the stuff is. That was more complex. And then we said, look, our job as engineers is make it simple. Really, you have to make it you put it, it works, no hassle, no batteries, you activate it, everything communicates wherever you are, indoor, outdoor. Second part, make it secure. Not secure from security, of course it's in, but also like our customers and our partners, they want a one-stop shop. If there's a problem with the hardware, call us. If there's a problem with communication, you call us. If there's a problem with the platform or the integration, you call us. One-stop shop. And that's also simplicity to your team, so they can focus on the processes with the customer to create the value. Finally, reliable. We are really changing the daily operations of all our customers. So it means they have to rely on the technology. Because if the data is no longer there, their operations will be stuck. And this is also why I believe we actually needed 12 years to get at the level where we are, because it's a trust thing. You change the bottom of the operations of the supply chain of the customers.
So just go a bit deeper on that. So because clearly the technology, and RFID being a good example, the technology has been available for quite a long time, really.
Yeah.
Why do you feel this business problem, or the realization of the business problem, is really starting to pick up in the customer base that we both serve? Because I would say if we had talked about this 3 years ago, I don't think we would have had as many active conversations as we have today.
That's correct.
It's almost like this is now coming to the top 5 issues that they're trying to resolve. So what do you think is driving that?
First of all, business. It's a macroeconomical trend. So we always have to look what drives the customer to decide to look at it. That's something macroeconomical. I mean, there is inflation, which means that actually everything gets more expensive. Secondly, there is a more just-in-time expectation, both within the process as from the end customer. So it just needs to be much more fluent. Everything needs to operate. And we also see a lot of multimodal projects. So it's no longer the same one we actually ship from A to B. There might be 3 or 4 entities in between. So you want that visibility because your customer, wants to stay very competitive in his market. That's a macroeconomical why there is the push from the market. From the technology, of course, it's also we get more standardization. We're not talking about proprietary communication protocols. It's not exotic new energy harvesting. It's just something as it is in your smartwatch, as it is in your smartphone. Technology is at scale, and everything on the cloud, on the application, is open for integration. So it's both dynamics come together where it's like a bit of a no-brainer. And of course, to get to that point, I often compare it a little bit like with aviation. Imagine you build an aircraft, it will take quite some time till people will trust you to go in that aircraft, be comfortable, and fly to New York over the ocean. So it's just a logical thing of technology. It needs to mature, it needs to be proven, and you need that track record of trust.
I think I completely agree, but I think there is another aspect as well. Certainly when we speak to our customer base, there is clearly a big focus on human labor, the human labor element. Not only has it become more expensive, and it becomes more expensive every year because of inflation, salaries have to increase, etc. But the availability of labor is now actually becoming a very key topic in every conversation that we talk about. And there's for 2 reasons. It's actually in both sides of the demographics. There is an aging workforce that is exiting the workforce. So I think I read a stat that in Germany, by 2040, about 15% of the working population will be retiring and not be replenished in the manufacturing sector. So with that kind of statistic, and then on top of that, the younger generation, there's a serious part of the younger generation that are not economically active, which is kind of surprising. So whether they are on social media and earning the money that way, I don't know, but they are living somehow. So on either side, we're shrinking working population. So the desire to design out human labor in the processes of manufacturing, supply chain, etc., becomes really a big focus, and therefore automation becomes important. And you only can really automate if your processes are seamless and you've got the right data structures behind it to drive a consistency outcome with an automated process. And that is, I think, another aspect that is driving the visibility need of all the assets. Because if I don't have my assets in the right place, I typically have a human intervention.
That's true.
So that is one of the aspects, and we have not been able to quantify that actually yet into a hard benefit, but it's definitely a discussion topic.
And I just think digitization is a logical path there. I often see it now with the upcoming AI agents. I think we all talk about it, we see the stock going crazy, and maybe it's just the beginning, so maybe it's not crazy at all. But for me, it's like, if you don't get it digital, you cannot actually optimize productivity. Do you see a lot of requests on productivity improvements from your customer? Is it like, okay, we go into this because we want it digital, because we want to be more productive, or we think it's just strategically smart? How do you see that happening with your customers?
So I think that's a really good question. Depending on the type of customer that we engage with, it tends to be a different lens that they look at the problem. But there's definitely a growing need to be more strategic about digitization. Because the productivity gains have been made if you just look at the human element. And what we're actually finding more is not so much productivity from the people that are on the shop floor or in the supply chain, but actually designing out waste or errors.
Yeah.
And that is actually an area where, unfortunately, people make mistakes, or maybe fortunately people make mistakes because it makes us human. But from an automation perspective, if you can design out any kind of misshipment or misplacement or not having the right item at the right location or the right dock door, that is really where the focus is currently, we're finding. And that plays again into the hand of digitizing, not only knowing where what is from an actual container, but also the contents of the container. Because the contents often are missing for whatever reason or damaged. And therefore linking the two together, effectively building a total view of that, the value stream of what are we moving, plus the assets that move these valuable items, that is where really the conversation is pivoting towards. And the consequence is almost, oh, and by the way, we probably save some minutes or hours here from our workforce. But it is actually the business benefit of designing out waste that we're seeing as being the key goal. And actually, that's a really old concept, by the way. So Kaizen is clearly from the 1980s, from the Toyota Motor Manufacturing Company. But we're back in that. Six Sigma, Kaizen, those kind of philosophies are absolutely back on the forefront of everybody. Now we have more mature technology, as you say, that allows us to actually take that extra step forward.
And can you explain me in which segments that with Peak Technologies here in the UK you see the most of the industries that are impacted, are demanding it?
Yeah.
Because you have all types of industries who have the same problem in the end.
Yeah, it's a little bit skewed purely because of where our customer base is, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, but the lens is slightly different. So in third-party logistics, which is inherently competitive, any bit of a saving that they can make somewhere will get attention. So there is that continuous improvement philosophy is in nearly all of the large 3PL players. We see that there, and there clearly we have a very interesting hook. At the other side, we see the high-value manufacturing sector being particularly of interest, and that is because the value of the content that sits in the asset is so high. Whether that is very valuable medication, whether that is parts for high-value manufacturing, electronics manufacturing processes, that is where it's not whether you lose the asset, it is not having the content of that asset in the right place. That is driving the business case there.
Yeah, critical components.
Correct. I would say at the retail end, I think there is a very big desire.
Yeah.
But because of the value of the assets and
It's
the
a challenge.
contents value, it is hard to get the ROI right, I find.
Yeah, but I can only acknowledge that one. Retail, it's like the smart pallet. That's like the new holy grail because the volumes are huge. But of course, you need to get at the price point, a technology integration point where you actually can go throwing it out like confetti, I would say, just to connect everything. Because that's the whole complexity of the business where we are in, is that if you don't connect everything, you actually miss parts of the puzzle. And in retail, the volumes are so big that it's really a challenge to get there. And there is where DHL actually took the leap of faith, because it's in Germany, the project where we are involved. And there, for example, they say, look, we have a lot of those rolling cages or roll cages, and they really have peak periods, like now Christmas, which is also like the Black Friday period. And at that moment, they have a huge congestion problem. And they say, we need that visibility. And the only way to do it, it's not by putting everywhere infrastructure, because it needs to work over the top, everywhere. But then, of course, you need a bit of a leap of faith of somebody from a strategic level, as you mentioned before, saying, look guys, we need that, because if we have it fully connected, we have such a visibility that it will impact us on productivity, efficiency, and so on. And then, of course, it's another way, because if you look at aerospace, where we do make quite some business, often the flows are not that big, I would say. It's like thousands of pieces running in specific flows, but critical pieces. And there, of course, the step to go into full digitization is much easier, because it's not that big upfront leap of faith you have to make on the investment.
So I guess the whole real-time tracking of these assets, I would say we've crossed the chasm now, and we're probably in the early majority part.
That's correct.
So there's still a lot of growth to come.
So René, what we've seen with most of our customers is that before they have been doing a lot of one-way shipments. So it means that they often just use packaging as is, like cardboard packaging and stuff like that. We see also with European directive coming up that returnable packaging is becoming more and more sustainable, but also more and more important in the supply chain. Have you seen something similar with your customers here in the UK?
Let me answer that in two ways. So first of all, I'll give you my personal opinion.
Okay.
Because I'm a firm believer that we are living on this planet with finite resources. And the world population has grown staggeringly, I would say, in the last 100 years, to a point where we are depleting our resources so fast that if we're not careful, there's nothing left to enjoy. So there is an absolute need, in my opinion, to make sure that whatever resources we use, we can harvest back to reuse them again, ideally with no waste whatsoever, because then we have a proper circular economy. And that is not just on the packaging, that is in anything that we do, whether that is clothing, whether that is electronics. So from a personal point of view, I feel very strongly about that anyway. From the customer's perspective, I would say there is an absolute growing awareness. And interestingly, it tends to be actually linked to the entire supply chain. So if, for instance, a retailer has a very strong ethos about sustainability and the circular economy, it almost pushes that all the way up in its procurement policies, up into the supply chain. And of course, then you get the zone 3 emission offsetting, etc., etc. You start to push that all the way up to the point of manufacture. And of course, at that point in time, we are in the perfect situation, because now we have a connected loop of interested parties that are working together on making sure that that circular initiative stays in place. And this type of technology can only be of great assistance for that. What could you share of your vision for the next 5 years from a Sensolus proposition perspective? Of course, without oversharing any competitive secrets that you might be preparing in your kitchen. But what could you share with us as your vision where this is going for the future?
So what we see, let's start part per part from a product point of view. Application is the most important part, and it needs to be very intuitive for everyone, and it needs to integrate with AI tools. If we look today, when I look at our solution, probably like 5% of a corporate company will access our application, look at our application, and find very valuable insights in this data. My dream is get it through the financial manager, get it even to HR departments, get it even to the people in the floor that are opening the dock, opening the doors, because that's for me crucial. The more people use the data, the more effective the solution will be. The key there for me is AI. And that's very simple. I look at my parents. Well, to be honest, iPhone opened for them to get a phone in their pocket because it was not working before. And now I also see when they use a ChatGPT just as a simple asking a question, they get quite fast the right results out of it. So there, I hope was in the next 2-3 years getting really integrated in that whole, everybody can access the data, because more people access the information or the data, the better the results will be also for the productivity of the complete company. So that's a big part where I see a lot of investments to be done. Mm-hmm. On the technology side itself, it's a small step innovation on the hardware. Why? Because big revolutions on hardware, people talk about satellites, they talk about battery without battery stuff, trackers. They will come, but for me, you have to make small innovation steps, because on hardware, you go inside the process of your customers, and just the next big thing It might pop up somewhere, but many failed. And our customers, they rely on this. So they don't want the big next thing. They want something stable, proven, fully secure, in the field, reliable. Final step, security. We do think that if we start digitizing everything, security will be more and more important. And that's just because look at the geopolitical situation, look at the competitive situations in the markets, but also look how people use technology today. You have to make sure you stay very high security level on everything you track to make sure there's not suddenly somebody disrupting your supply chain because you're hacking your supply chain. So for me, the three main things when we look at the technology, what we do, where we are really in, is the first thing for me, it's the use of AI. AI will enable a lot of all the potential users to get real value of all this supply chain visibility and data. Secondly, the trackers, the hardware, there will be small innovation step. Maybe there's someone disrupting big, but I believe small improvements on battery, form factor, technology, and so on, because it needs to be very reliable. And then finally, it's about the security. We have to make sure that everything we track is very secure, so it's not being vulnerable to cyber attacks. So I believe that's the three big steps that's in front of us on our evolution at Sensolus.
Okay, well, Christoph, thank you very much. First of all, for coming here, of course, to the UK.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you. And secondly, thank you for the partnership that we've had so far. We are truly excited, not only about our relationship, but also where this market is still in the early stages of its growth. And we're super pleased that we feel that we've a very strong technology partner along our side to serve our customers' requests. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks a lot, René, and we look forward to our journey.
Same
Thank
here.
you.
Thank you.